Okay, well, Friday's disappointing numbers raise concerns yet again about just when jobs will be coming back. Well, a recent study says it may take more than 7 years to restore employment to pre-crisis levels, and that is in 2017. So joining me now is one of the authors of the study, Rutgers economics professor Joseph Seneca. Professor, thanks so much for being with us.
Good morning.
And you say it basically boils down to mathematics. We're creating fewer jobs at a slower pace throughout this decade, so it's very likely we're going to leave the first decade of 2000 in the 21st century with fewer jobs than when we walked in with it, right?
Well, that's right. I mean, if you look back on this decade, which begun with such promise at the end of the 90s when we were on a terrific economic run, but we've had 2 recessions with a relatively brief and tepid recovery in between. And it looks like we're almost guaranteed to end the decade in a few short months with approximately 1.7 million fewer private sector jobs than when the decade began. We've called it in our report the lost employment decade. That hasn't happened since the 1930s. And in contrast, if you look at the 1980s, we added 16 million private sector jobs. In the 1990s, we added 19 million private sector jobs. That's 35 million private sector jobs created in those 20 years, compared with a loss of 1.7 million private sector jobs in this decade. That's certainly quite a come down.
So, Professor, then what's going on? What's driving this then?
Well, again, we've had these 2 recessions in this last Great Recession. In the 20 months since December 07 through September 09, in that time period, we've lost 7.2 million private sector jobs. That's just an enormous jobs deficit, and we're likely to lose another 300,000 in the last quarter. So by the time the decade ends, in just a few short months, the job loss due to the Great Recession will be about 7.5 million private sector jobs. And then if you add in the normal increase in the labor force over this time, just the aging of people entering the labor force, that probably gives us a job deficit of 9.4 million jobs. And
But you also say, Professor, though, that the makeup of the job losses is changing, though, right? I mean, we're losing more service jobs than we are manufacturing.
Yes, that used to be in the previous recessions, and that's certainly been true up to the beginning of this decade, in the 2001 recession. Almost all the jobs that tended to be lost in recessions were in manufacturing and construction. In this recession, of those 7.2 million private sector jobs lost, about half have been in the service sectors, and that's distinctly different.
Okay, so given that then, and given the different makeup of these job losses, what do these job losses since the beginning of the recession in December 2007, what do they tell you about economic recovery?
Well, that unfortunately it's going to be a very long road back, even under optimistic assumptions. We talk about a 9.4 million jobs deficit by the end of this year, which accounts for the job losses and the labor force growth. And then even if you assume that we will be adding private sector jobs beginning in January 2010, and do so at a relatively robust rate, 2.1 million a year, that's the rate we added private sector jobs in the 1990s expansion, and that's a very generous assumption. And then accounting for labor force going forward, then here's where the harsh arithmetic comes in. It will take over 7.5 years till the middle 2017 to get back to those labor market conditions that existed at the start of 2000, at the end of 2007, a 4.9% unemployment rate.
And Professor, we've only got a few more seconds, but I need to ask you then, do you agree that that means that the jobs data becomes a leading indicator then for the economy?
It is the single indicator. It's the most visible and visceral measure of economic performance. It provides consumer confidence. It is obviously the political third rail. Job creation is the #1 priority.
Okay, Professor Seneca, that's all the time we have, but thank you so much for your forecast.